There are places on Earth that seem almost impossible. Ancient cities buried beneath drifting sand, temple complexes hidden for centuries beneath forests, fortresses abandoned without a final battle, and mysterious stone monuments whose builders left behind no written history. These are not legends. They are real archaeological discoveries, uncovered by archaeologists, yet many continue to raise questions that history cannot fully answer. Tonight, we're traveling across the ancient world, exploring some of the greatest archaeological discoveries ever made. Along the way, we'll uncover forgotten temples, lost cities, hidden tombs, remarkable fortresses, sacred monuments, and extraordinary engineering achievements that continue to reshape what we know about the people who came before us. Whenever the evidence is clear, we'll follow it. And where history falls silent, we'll carefully explore the leading theories without ever confusing them with fact. And if you enjoy calm archaeological documentaries like this one, I'd love to have you subscribe for future explorations. Now, let's travel back thousands of years to one of the greatest archaeological discoveries ever uncovered, the village frozen on the day it burned. For nearly 3,000 years, it remained hidden beneath the quiet wetlands of eastern England. The seasons came and went. Spring rains flooded the marshes. Summer grasses covered the landscape. Autumn winds swept across the riverbanks. Winter frost settled over the fields. Generation after generation passed without realizing that an entire Bronze Age village rested beneath their feet. Its houses, its tools, its meals, and the final moments of the people who once called it home. Then archaeologists began to dig. As layers of dark river mud were carefully removed, wooden walls slowly emerged. Complete houses appeared. Cooking pots still rested where they had fallen. Personal belongings remained scattered across ancient floors. It was as though time itself had stopped on the very day disaster struck. The site is known as Must Farm. Located in the county of Cambridgeshire, eastern England, it stands beside an ancient waterway that once formed part of a vast network of rivers and wetlands. Today, the surrounding landscape is largely farmland. But around 850 BC, during Britain's late Bronze Age, this was a very different world. Dense forests covered much of the region. Broad marshes stretched across the lowlands. Rivers served as the fastest routes for travel and trade. Small communities settled wherever water provided food, transport, and protection. Among them was a remarkable village built almost entirely above the river itself. The settlement consisted of several circular timber houses supported on massive oak posts driven deep into the riverbed. Wooden walkways connected one building to another. From above, it would have appeared as a small island village rising above the water. Inside each house, daily life unfolded much as it had for generations. Families prepared meals over open hearths. Bronze smiths repaired valuable tools. Fish were cleaned beside the platforms. Textiles were woven by hand. Wooden bowls, clay pots, woven baskets, and carefully crafted belongings filled every home. Although modest in size, the settlement was thriving. Then, without warning, fire swept through the village. Exactly how it began remains unknown. Some archaeologists believe it may have started accidentally within one of the wooden houses. Others have suggested that conflict between communities cannot be ruled out. The evidence does not allow a definitive conclusion. What is certain is that the flames spread with astonishing speed. The buildings were constructed almost entirely from timber. As the fire weakened the heavy oak supports, the houses collapsed one after another into the river below. Within a short time, the entire settlement had disappeared beneath the water. Ordinarily, very little would survive such a catastrophe. Wood quickly decays, fabric disappears, food decomposes. Entire buildings vanish within only a few generations. But Must Farm was protected by an extraordinary combination of circumstances. The collapsed houses sank into thick river mud where almost no oxygen could penetrate. These waterlogged conditions dramatically slowed decay. Instead of disappearing, the village remained sealed beneath layers of silt for nearly 3 millennia. It became one of the best preserved prehistoric settlements ever discovered in Europe. Excavations have revealed thousands of remarkably preserved objects. Bronze axes still fitted into their wooden handles. Fine woven textiles survived beneath the mud. Delicately carved wooden bowls appeared almost untouched by time. Pottery remained where it had fallen during the collapse. Some vessels even contained the charred remains of meals that had been cooking when the fire began. For archaeologists, such discoveries are exceptionally rare. Most prehistoric sites preserve only fragments. Must Farm preserved everyday life itself. The village has often been compared to Pompeii, not because it was buried beneath volcanic ash, but because both places capture a single moment in history with extraordinary clarity. At Pompeii, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius preserved a Roman city. At Must Farm, fire, water, and mud preserved an ordinary Bronze Age community. Both allow archaeologists to move beyond kings and monuments, offering a rare opportunity to understand how ordinary people lived, worked, and organized their daily lives. The discoveries have transformed long-held ideas about Bronze Age Britain. The quality of the woodworking, the sophistication of bronze craftsmanship, the finely woven textiles, and the evidence for long-distance trade all reveal a society that was far more advanced than many historians once believed. These people were skilled builders, experienced craftspeople, active traders connected to communities across Britain and beyond. Far from being isolated villagers, they formed part of a dynamic and interconnected prehistoric world. Today, very little of the settlement can be seen above ground. The wetlands have changed. The river has shifted. The wooden houses are gone. Yet beneath the quiet fields of Cambridgeshire, the remains of Must Farm continue to reshape our understanding of Britain's distant past. Sometimes, history survives through magnificent temples, towering pyramids, or vast stone monuments. And sometimes, it survives because one ordinary village met an extraordinary end, leaving behind a single day that remained untouched for nearly 3,000 years, waiting patiently beneath the mud until archaeology brought its story back into the light. The oldest stone masks ever discovered. For thousands of years, they rested in complete darkness, hidden deep inside a remote cave overlooking the Judean desert. No sunlight reached them. No voices disturbed the silence. Dust slowly settled across their carved faces. Generation after generation passed above the hills of what is now Israel, without anyone knowing that some of humanity's oldest known stone masks were waiting beneath the earth. Then, archaeologists entered the cave. As they carefully explored its narrow chambers, they uncovered a remarkable collection of objects unlike anything they had expected. Among them were several limestone masks, each one carved with carefully shaped eyes, a distinct nose, and small holes drilled around the edges. They were not sculptures meant to decorate a home, nor were they simple works of art. They had been created for a purpose, one that archaeologists are still trying to understand. The discovery was made inside Nahal Himar Cave, a small cavern overlooking the Dead Sea in what is now southern Israel. Although modest in size, the cave has become one of the most important prehistoric archaeological sites ever discovered in the Near East. Its dry climate created exceptional conditions for preservation. Unlike many prehistoric sites where only stone survives, Nahal Himar also preserved fragile materials such as wood, woven fibers, leather, and plant remains. Together, these discoveries have offered an unusually detailed glimpse into the lives of some of the region's earliest farming communities. The cave dates primarily to the pre-pottery Neolithic B period, around 8500 to 9,000 years ago. This was a remarkable moment in human history. People were gradually moving away from lives centered on hunting and gathering. Permanent villages were beginning to appear. Agriculture expanded across the Fertile Crescent. Goats and sheep were being domesticated. Stone houses replaced temporary shelters. Communities grew larger, and society became increasingly organized. It was a period of profound change, one that reshaped the relationship between people and the land around them. Among the cave's most extraordinary discoveries were the stone masks, carved from limestone. Each mask displays a human face with striking simplicity. Large openings form the eyes. A carefully shaped nose projects from the center. Some feature carved teeth or subtle facial details. Small holes drilled around the edges suggest they may once have been attached to something, perhaps secured with cords or decorated with organic materials that have long since disappeared. Although every mask shares similar characteristics, no two are exactly alike. Each appears to have been crafted by hand with remarkable care. These masks are among the oldest stone masks ever discovered anywhere in the world. Most examples date to approximately 9000 years ago, placing them among humanity's earliest attempts to create large stone representations of the human face. Their age alone makes them extraordinary, but their purpose remains one of archaeology's enduring mysteries. No written records exist. No traditions survive to explain their meaning. The people who carved them left behind only the objects themselves. Everything else has been lost to time. Many archaeologists believe the masks were connected to ritual life. Throughout the pre-pottery Neolithic, communities across the Levant placed unusual importance on their ancestors. At several settlements, the skulls of the dead were carefully removed after burial. Some were covered with plaster and modeled to recreate human faces. Others were displayed inside homes or special buildings. These practices suggest that remembering the dead formed an important part of community life. The masks from Nahal al-Himar may have played a role in similar ceremonies. Perhaps they represented respected ancestors. Perhaps they were worn during rituals. Or perhaps they symbolized spiritual beings whose identities are now impossible to recover. The cave itself adds another layer to the mystery. Unlike an ordinary village, there is little evidence that people lived inside Nahal al-Himar on a permanent basis. Instead, many researchers believe it functioned as a special ceremonial place. Alongside the masks, excavations uncovered woven baskets, decorated skulls, wooden artifacts, bone tools, and objects coated with one of the earliest known uses of adhesive made from bitumen and other natural materials. Many of these items appear too carefully prepared to have been discarded as ordinary possessions. Their presence suggests the cave held a significance beyond everyday life. The masks also reveal the remarkable skill of the people who created them. Using only stone tools, Neolithic craftsmen shaped hard limestone with surprising precision. The eye openings are carefully balanced. The facial proportions remain consistent. The drilled holes required patience and considerable technical ability. These were not rough carvings made in haste. They were the products of experienced artisans working within a community that valued symbolic expression as much as practical survival. Today, the faces carved thousands of years ago continue to watch silently from museum displays. The people who created them left behind no written language, no names, no stories, only stone. Yet those carefully carved expressions remain among the earliest surviving human faces ever produced. Whether they honored ancestors, represented spirits, or served a purpose that has been completely forgotten. The masks of Nahal al-Himar remind us that long before history was written, human beings were already searching for ways to remember the past, understand the unseen, and give lasting form to the faces that mattered most. The quarry that built Rome's greatest columns, Mons Claudianus, located deep within Egypt's eastern desert, roughly halfway between the Nile River and the Red Sea, it is one of the largest Roman quarries ever discovered. Today, the surrounding landscape appears almost lifeless. Towering granite mountains rise above endless fields of stone. Rain is exceptionally rare. Summer temperatures regularly climb well above 40 degrees Celsius. Fresh water is scarce, yet nearly 2,000 years ago, thousands of people lived and worked here. The quarry was established during the 1st century AD, most likely during the reign of the Roman Emperor Claudius, from whom the site takes its name. Its purpose was remarkably specific. The mountains surrounding Mons Claudianus contained an exceptionally hard stone known as granodiorite, often mistaken for granite. This pale gray rock was valued throughout the Roman Empire for its strength, durability, and elegant appearance. It became one of the most prestigious building materials available to Roman architects. Extracting the stone demanded extraordinary effort. Workers first identified natural fractures within the mountain. Iron chisels and heavy hammers were used to cut deep channels around enormous blocks. Wooden wedges were driven into narrow cracks. When soaked with water, the expanding wood helped separate the stone from the surrounding rock. The process could take weeks, sometimes months, before a single block finally broke free. Every mistake risked destroying months of labor. Many of the stones removed from Mons Claudianus were enormous. Some weighed more than 200 tons. Several were carved into massive column shafts before leaving the quarry, reducing unnecessary weight during transport. Even so, moving them remained one of the greatest engineering challenges of the ancient world. Teams of workers dragged the finished columns across specially prepared desert roads using large wooden sledges. Oxen and hundreds of laborers worked together to move each load toward the Nile. From there, the stone continued its long journey by boat to construction sites across the empire. The destinations of these columns included some of Rome's most celebrated monuments. Stone from Mons Claudianus was used in the construction of the Pantheon. It also appeared in the Temple of Venus in Roma, imperial villas, public baths, and numerous monumental buildings throughout the empire. Visitors walking through ancient Rome often admired the towering columns without realizing they had begun their journey hundreds of kilometers away in one of the harshest deserts on Earth. Every polished surface carried with it the story of an extraordinary logistical achievement. The quarry itself functioned almost like a small town. Excavations have uncovered workshops, living quarters, storehouses, bathhouses, animal pens, and administrative buildings. Hundreds of workers lived here throughout the year. Some were highly skilled stonemasons. Others transported supplies, cared for animals, repaired tools, or managed records. Life depended upon careful organization. Food, water, fuel, and equipment all had to be brought across the desert from the Nile Valley. Without constant supply caravans, the settlement could not survive. One of the site's most remarkable discoveries has been its written records. Archaeologists have recovered hundreds of ostraca, broken pieces of pottery used as inexpensive writing surfaces. These inscriptions record deliveries of grain, requests for clothing, work schedules, medical concerns, official correspondence, and even personal messages exchanged between workers. Together, they reveal the daily routines of an isolated community whose lives revolved around the quarry. Rather than telling the story of emperors, these simple documents preserve the voices of ordinary people whose labor made Rome's greatest architecture possible. Not every stone reached its destination. Even today, visitors can see unfinished columns abandoned where flaws appeared during carving. Some cracked unexpectedly. Others revealed hidden weaknesses inside the rock. Rather than risking failure during transport, the damaged pieces were simply left behind, scattered across the quarry floor. They remain exactly where Roman workers abandoned them nearly 2,000 years ago. Their unfinished surfaces preserve the marks of tools that have not touched stone since antiquity. Today, Mons Claudianus stands silent beneath the Egyptian sun. The caravans no longer cross the desert. The workshops have fallen into ruin. The quarry echoes only with the wind. Yet the stone removed from these mountains still stands inside some of the greatest surviving monuments of the Roman world. Every towering column, every polished surface, and every carefully carved block serves as a reminder that history is shaped not only by emperors and architects, but also by the forgotten workers who transformed an empty desert mountain into one of the Roman Empire's greatest sources of stone. The cemetery where every grave was built like a house, Cincantu Necropolis. Located near the town of Puttafagari in northwestern Sardinia, Italy, it forms part of a wider tradition of prehistoric rock-cut cemeteries found across the island. Its name, Cincantu, means the enchantment in the Sardinian language. It is an appropriate description. Unlike many ancient cemeteries that consist of simple graves, this one was carefully designed as an underground village. Every chamber was shaped to resemble a house. The necropolis dates to around 3500 to 2700 BC during the Osiri culture, one of Sardinia's most sophisticated Neolithic societies. This was a time when farming villages were expanding across the island. Communities cultivated wheat and barley, raised sheep, goats, and cattle, produced finely decorated pottery, and maintained trade connections with other parts of the Mediterranean. Although no written records survive, their craftsmanship reveals a society with complex beliefs and remarkable artistic ability. The tombs themselves were carved directly into solid limestone using stone tools. The work demanded enormous patience. Builders first cut narrow entrances into the rock. Beyond them, they created multiple interconnected chambers. Instead of leaving the interiors plain, they carefully shaped them to imitate the architecture of real houses. Stone benches resembled sleeping platforms. Ceilings were carved to resemble timber roofs. False doors appeared on interior walls. Some chambers even included carved pillars supporting the ceiling. These details were entirely symbolic. They served no structural purpose. Instead, they recreated familiar spaces from everyday life. Archaeologists believe this design reflected the community's understanding of death. Rather than viewing the grave as a final resting place alone, the people of the Osiri culture may have imagined the afterlife as a continuation of ordinary existence. The deceased were given permanent homes beneath the earth. Just as families gathered inside houses above ground, the dead rested together inside carefully constructed chambers below. Many of the tombs contained the remains of multiple individuals. Generation after generation was buried within the same underground house. Excavations have uncovered a variety of burial objects. Fine pottery vessels accompanied the dead. Stone tools, shell ornaments, beads, and small ceremonial objects were placed beside the bodies, Red ochre has also been found within several Sardinian rock-cut tombs, including examples from this period. The bright mineral pigment appears to have been used during funerary rituals. Many archaeologists believe it symbolized life, rebirth, or the renewal of blood. Although its precise meaning remains uncertain, its repeated presence suggests it held deep spiritual significance. One of the most striking features of Sinkantu is the extraordinary attention given to architectural detail. The builders were not simply excavating chambers. They were reproducing the appearance of the world above ground. Doorways were carefully framed. Ceilings displayed carved roof beams. Walls were shaped with surprising symmetry. Some false doors appear to lead nowhere at all. Researchers believe these symbolic entrances may have represented passageways between the world of the living and the world beyond death. Without written records, their exact meaning remains open to interpretation. The cemetery also reflects the growing complexity of Neolithic society. Constructing dozens of rock-cut tombs required planning, organization, and considerable labor. Entire communities likely participated in their creation. The necropolis was not built in a single generation. It expanded gradually over centuries as families returned again and again to bury their relatives in the same sacred landscape. Each new chamber became another chapter in a history preserved beneath the stone. Today, the hills surrounding Sinkantu appear quiet and unremarkable. Only the carved entrances hint at what lies below. Inside the limestone, ancient rooms remain much as their builders left them thousands of years ago. No furniture survives. No written names mark the walls. Yet every carved doorway, every symbolic roof beam, and every carefully shaped chamber speaks of a civilization that believed a home should not end with death. For the people of prehistoric Sardinia, the final journey did not lead to an empty grave. It led to another house, carved forever into the living rock. Chapter 5. The bronze cauldron found sealed with its last meal. The discovery was made at the Hochdorf burial, near the village of Hochdorf and Deir in southwestern Germany. Dating to around 530 BC, the tomb belongs to the early Celtic Hallstatt culture, a society that flourished across much of Central Europe during the early Iron Age. Although the Celts left few written records of their own, their burials reveal communities that were wealthy, highly organized, and deeply connected through trade. The Hochdorf tomb remains one of the finest examples ever discovered. The burial chamber itself had been built almost entirely from timber. Heavy oak beams formed its walls. Additional layers of stone and earth created a large burial mound above. Unlike many ancient graves, this one escaped extensive looting. When archaeologists entered the chamber, they found an astonishing collection of objects preserved almost exactly as they had been arranged more than 2,500 years earlier. Each item appeared to have been placed with deliberate care. Together, they offered an extraordinary glimpse into the life of an Iron Age ruler. At the center of the chamber rested the remains of a man believed to have been around 40 years old at the time of his death. He lay upon an elaborate bronze couch nearly 3 meters in length. The furniture itself was richly decorated. Its supports took the form of small wheeled figures cast in bronze. Gold ornaments adorned the man's clothing. Fine jewelry surrounded his body. Nearby stood drinking horns made from the horns of wild cattle. Every object suggested exceptional status. This was no ordinary burial. One object, however, drew particular attention. A massive bronze cauldron imported from the Greek world. The vessel measured more than 1 meter in diameter and could hold hundreds of liters of liquid. Its handles were decorated with sculpted lions. The craftsmanship differed noticeably from local Celtic metalwork. Archaeologists believe it was produced somewhere in the eastern Mediterranean before making its way north through long-distance trade networks. Its presence inside the tomb demonstrates just how connected Iron Age Europe had become. When researchers examined the interior of the cauldron, they made a remarkable discovery. Organic residue remained at the bottom. Scientific analysis revealed traces consistent with a fermented drink made primarily from honey mead. The vessel had originally been filled with enough beverage to serve hundreds of people. Although the liquid itself had long since disappeared, its final remnants survived within the bronze. It appears the cauldron had been prepared specifically for the funeral. Rather than being emptied afterward, it was sealed inside the tomb exactly as the ceremony ended. The discovery provides valuable insight into Celtic ritual life. Across many ancient societies, large communal feasts accompanied important ceremonies. Food and drink reinforced social bonds, honored respected leaders, and marked significant moments within the community. The Hochdorf cauldron suggests that similar traditions existed among the early Celts. The funeral may have included a great gathering where mead was shared among mourners before the remaining contents were left beside the deceased as part of the burial itself. Although no written account survives, the archaeological evidence points toward a ceremony of remarkable scale. The rest of the tomb supports this picture of extraordinary wealth. 9 drinking horns were suspended from the chamber wall. 8 were made from the horns of wild aurochs. The 9th, far larger than the others, was decorated with gold and intended for the chieftain alone. A 4-wheeled wagon stood nearby. Bronze vessels, fine textiles, personal ornaments, and imported luxury goods filled the chamber. Many of these objects had traveled hundreds of kilometers before reaching Hochdorf. Their presence reflects a society engaged in extensive trade long before the rise of the Roman Empire. Today, the mead has vanished. The feast ended thousands of years ago. The mourners have long since disappeared, yet the great bronze cauldron still survives. Its walls preserve faint traces of the final drink prepared for a man whose name has been lost to history. It reminds us that archaeology is not always about kings or battles. Sometimes, a single cooking vessel, still carrying the remains of its last meal, can reveal how an entire civilization honored its dead, celebrated its leaders, and remembered them long after the final cup had been raised. The stone tower built to watch a silent sea, across the broad plains of central Sardinia, a massive stone fortress still rises above the surrounding countryside. Its weathered walls have endured more than 3,000 years of wind, rain, and earthquakes. From a distance, it appears almost like a medieval castle, yet it was already ancient when Rome itself was little more than a collection of villages. This remarkable structure is known as Nuraghe Arrubiu, the largest and most complex nuraghe ever discovered on the island of Sardinia. Even today, archaeologists continue to debate exactly why it was built. Nuraghe Arrubiu is located near the town of Orali in southern Sardinia. Its name, Arrubiu, means red in the Sardinian language, a reference to the reddish color of the basalt stones used in its construction. The monument belongs to the mysterious Nuragic civilization, a culture that flourished on Sardinia between roughly 1800 and 900 BC during the Bronze Age. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, the Nuragic people left behind no written history. Almost everything we know about them comes from archaeology, and among all their surviving monuments, none is more impressive than Nuraghe Arrubiu. At first glance, the structure resembles a single enormous tower. In reality, it was an entire fortified complex. At its center stood a towering keep that originally rose to nearly 30 meters in height. Surrounding it were 5 additional towers connected by thick defensive walls. Beyond these stood another ring of fortifications containing at least 7 more towers. Altogether, the complex covered an area of nearly 5,000 square meters. It was one of the largest stone constructions in prehistoric Europe. Building such a monument required remarkable engineering. The Nuragic builders used enormous blocks of volcanic basalt without mortar. Each stone was carefully shaped and balanced against the next. As the walls rose higher, the builders gradually angled each layer inward. This technique created the distinctive corbelled vaults that still survive inside many Nuragic towers today, without cement, without iron cranes, and using only Bronze Age technology. They created structures capable of surviving for more than 3 millennia. The central tower offered commanding views across the surrounding landscape. On clear days, observers could watch movement across the nearby plains for many kilometers. Although the Mediterranean coast lies farther away, the surrounding hills formed important routes connecting inland Sardinia with coastal settlements. Many archaeologists believe towers like Nuraghe Arrubiu allowed communities to monitor these travel corridors, communicate with neighboring settlements, and respond quickly to approaching visitors or potential threats. Whether signals were sent using fires, smoke, or other methods remains uncertain. But the location was clearly chosen for its strategic visibility. Yet Nuraghe Arrubiu was far more than a military fortress. Excavations have uncovered evidence of workshops, storage rooms, courtyards, and domestic spaces, pottery fragments, bronze tools, grinding stones, animal bones, and food remains suggest that people lived and worked inside the complex throughout much of the year. It functioned as the center of a thriving community. Political authority, craft production, trade, and ceremonial life may all have been concentrated within its walls, rather than serving only as a defensive stronghold. The monument likely played many roles at once. The surrounding settlement expanded over centuries. Dozens of smaller buildings clustered around the fortress. Families raised livestock, stored grain, produced pottery, worked bronze, and maintained connections with neighboring communities across the island. Evidence also points to long-distance trade, bronze objects, imported goods, and similarities with other Mediterranean cultures suggest that Sardinia was far from isolated. Ships crossed these waters long before the rise of classical Greece or Rome. The Nuraghic people participated in an active maritime world stretching across the Mediterranean. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding Nuraghe Arrubiu concerns its builders themselves. The Nuraghic civilization constructed more than 7,000 nuraghes across Sardinia. Some were simple towers, others developed into large fortified settlements. Yet no surviving texts explain who governed them, how authority was organized, or exactly why so many were built. Some researchers see them as symbols of elite power. Others view them as communal centers shared by entire villages. The evidence supports elements of both ideas, but no single explanation has answered every question. By the early 1st millennium BC, the importance of many nuraghes gradually declined. New Mediterranean powers, including the Phoenicians and later the Carthaginians, established settlements along Sardinia's coasts. Trade patterns changed. Political structures evolved. Many towers were abandoned, while others continued to be reused for centuries. Nuraghe Arrubiu itself experienced several phases of occupation before eventually falling silent. Its stone walls remained, long after the people who built them had disappeared from history. Today, visitors walking through Nuraghe Arrubiu pass beneath towering arches, built more than 3,000 years ago. The narrow stairways still climb through walls of carefully balanced stone. The great central courtyard remains enclosed by its ring of ancient towers. No written inscription identifies its builders. No surviving legend explains its original purpose. Yet every massive block tells the same story. Long before the famous fortresses of medieval Europe, a forgotten Bronze Age civilization mastered the art of building in stone, creating monuments that still watch over the Sardinian landscape, as silently as they have for thousands of years. The terracotta army's forgotten neighbor. In the fertile plains just north of modern Xi'an, beneath layers of farmland that appeared perfectly ordinary, another imperial city lay hidden underground. For centuries, farmers walked across these fields without realizing that thousands of carefully crafted figures rested only a few meters below their feet. Unlike the famous terracotta army, these statues never became household names. There were no life-sized warriors standing in battle formation, no rows of towering generals or armored horses. Instead, the underground world of Han Yangling revealed something far more intimate. It preserved an entire miniature empire. The Han Yangling Mausoleum was built for Emperor Jing of Han, who ruled China from 57 to 141 BC, and for his empress, Wangji. The complex lies about 20 kilometers north of Xi'an in Shaanxi province. Construction began during Emperor Jing's lifetime, following a long-standing Chinese imperial tradition. Like many rulers before and after him, he believed that life continued after death. His tomb was designed to provide everything an emperor might need in the next world. But unlike the earlier Qin emperor, Jing chose a very different approach. When archaeologists began excavating the site during the late 20th century, they uncovered hundreds of narrow burial pits radiating outward from the central mausoleum. Inside these pits stood thousands of terracotta figurines. At first glance, they appeared surprisingly small. Most measured only about 50 to 60 centimeters in height. Many had no arms, others lacked clothing entirely. Yet these were not unfinished sculptures originally. Each figure possessed wooden arms attached with pegs. They were dressed in real silk garments. Hair was carefully arranged. Some may even have carried miniature tools or weapons. Time simply destroyed the organic materials, leaving only the fired clay bodies behind. The difference between Han Yangling and the famous terracotta army reflects a major change in Chinese imperial philosophy. The army buried with Qin Shi Huang emphasized military power. Its soldiers stood ready for eternal battle. Han Yangling tells another story here. The emperor's afterlife centered on peaceful government rather than conquest. The figurines include officials, servants, musicians, farm workers, domestic animals, and attendants. Together, they recreate the daily life of an imperial court instead of a battlefield. Animal figurines are especially abundant throughout the burial complex. Archaeologists discovered horses, dogs, sheep, goats, pigs, and cattle arranged in carefully planned groups. Some burial pits appear to represent complete farms, others resemble royal stables or workshops. There are even miniature granaries and storage facilities, rather than preparing only for defense. The emperor seems to have prepared for every aspect of ordinary existence: food, labor, entertainment, administration, and agriculture all accompanied him into eternity. The craftsmanship of the figurines is remarkably refined. Each face displays subtle individual differences. Some appear youthful, others seem older and more experienced. Facial expressions remain calm and natural. The sculptors paid careful attention to posture and proportion. Although much smaller than the Qin warriors, the Han figures possess a quiet realism that reflects the artistic ideals of the early Han dynasty. Many were originally painted in vivid colors. Traces of red, black, white, and pink pigments have survived on a number of examples. Unfortunately, like many ancient painted sculptures, most of the colors faded rapidly once exposed to air. One of the site's most fascinating discoveries involves the burial layout itself. The mausoleum was designed almost like a functioning capital city. Separate pits served different purposes. Some contained military guards, others held domestic workers. Nearby areas represented kitchens, livestock enclosures, and administrative offices. The arrangement suggests that the emperor expected the afterlife to operate much like his earthly kingdom. Death was not viewed as an ending, but as the continuation of imperial responsibility. Everything necessary for governing remained carefully organized beneath the ground. Modern archaeological methods have transformed the study of Han Yangling, instead of removing every object immediately. Researchers have used glass-floored walkways that allow visitors to look directly into excavation trenches. Many figurines remain exactly where they were discovered. This approach preserves valuable archaeological information while allowing people to observe the burial complex almost exactly as it appeared when first uncovered. It also reminds visitors that excavation is not simply about recovering artifacts. It is about understanding how those artifacts relate to one another within their original setting. Although Han Yangling receives far fewer visitors than the nearby Terracotta Army, its importance to archaeology is no less remarkable. The site reveals how dramatically Chinese imperial beliefs changed within only a few generations. Military conquest gave way to stable administration. Displays of overwhelming power were replaced by images of peaceful prosperity. The emperor's eternal kingdom became one sustained by ordinary people performing ordinary tasks. Today, thousands of silent clay figures continue to stand beneath the fields of Shaanxi. Most have never left the burial pits where they were placed more than 2,000 years ago. They carry no weapons. They make no grand display. Instead, they preserve a quieter vision of empire, one where rulers believe that the routines of everyday life, the work of farmers, the care of servants, and the order of a peaceful court would continue long after death itself had arrived. The mummy bundle that held a forgotten child king. Along the dry Pacific coast of southern Peru, the desert has an extraordinary ability to preserve the past. Rain falls only rarely. The air remains remarkably dry throughout the year. Organic materials that would quickly decay elsewhere can survive here for thousands of years. It is one of the few places on Earth where cloth, hair, feathers, and even human skin can endure across entire millennia. Within this landscape, the ancient people of the Paracas culture created some of the most remarkable burials ever discovered in the Americas. The Paracas civilization flourished between roughly 800 and 100 BC on the Paracas Peninsula and nearby valleys along Peru's southern coast. They were skilled farmers, expert fishermen, and master textile makers. Long before the rise of the Inca Empire, the Paracas produced woven fabrics of astonishing quality. Many archaeologists still consider their textiles among the finest ever created in the ancient world. For the Paracas, cloth was far more than clothing. It represented wealth, identity status, and spiritual belief. When archaeologists excavated Paracas cemeteries during the 20th century, they uncovered hundreds of carefully prepared mummy bundles rather than placing the deceased inside wooden coffins. The Paracas wrapped each body in layer upon layer of finely woven textiles. Some bundles contained dozens of separate cloths. Together they formed large rounded packages that sometimes stood nearly as tall as an adult person. Each layer carried its own colors, patterns, and symbolic designs. Creating a single burial bundle required an enormous investment of time and skill. At the center of each bundle, the body rested in a tightly flexed position. The knees were drawn toward the chest, arms folded close to the body. This posture appears repeatedly throughout Paracas cemeteries. Archaeologists believe it reflected carefully observed funerary traditions rather than simple practicality around the body. The builders placed embroidered garments, feathered textiles, ceremonial objects, food offerings, tools, jewelry, and personal possessions intended to accompany the deceased into the next world. One of the most remarkable discoveries involved a particularly elaborate mummy bundle containing the remains of a young individual. The richness of the burial immediately attracted attention. The surrounding textiles displayed extraordinary craftsmanship. Rare featherwork decorated several garments, fine ornaments accompanied the body. The individual had received a level of care far beyond that of an ordinary burial. For many years, researchers believed they had uncovered the grave of a young ruler, sometimes described as a child king or elite prince. Although no written records survived to confirm the person's identity, the burial clearly belonged to someone of exceptional importance within Paracas society. The textiles themselves became one of archaeology's greatest treasures. Using cotton combined with the wool of llamas and alpacas, Paracas weavers created intricate embroidery filled with vibrant colors. Natural dyes produced brilliant shades of red, yellow, blue, green, and purple. Many fabrics featured human figures with elaborate headdresses, flying supernatural beings, animals, marine creatures, and geometric patterns whose meanings remain uncertain. Some garments contained tens of thousands of carefully stitched threads. A single textile may have required months, or even years, to complete. Scientific study of the mummy bundles has revealed far more than artistic achievement. Modern techniques, including CT scanning and microscopic analysis, allow researchers to examine the bodies without unwrapping every layer. These investigations provide valuable information about health, nutrition, disease, and daily life. Some individuals show evidence of healed injuries. Others reveal signs of physical labor or chronic illness. The textiles themselves preserve pollen, plant fibers, and traces of pigments that help archaeologists reconstruct the ancient environment and burial rituals. The bundles also illustrate how deeply the Paracas connected textiles with memory. Rather than hiding the dead beneath simple coverings, they transformed each burial into a carefully crafted work of art. Every embroidered cloth represented countless hours of labor. Every additional layer expressed respect for the deceased. The mummy bundle itself became a visible symbol of family devotion and social identity. In many cases, the wrapping was almost as important as the body it enclosed. Today, many of the Paracas mummy bundles remain among the best-preserved ancient burials in South America. Their brilliant textiles continue to astonish historians, artists, and archaeologists alike. The identity of the richly buried child may never be known with certainty. No inscription records a name. No royal chronicle survives. Yet the burial speaks through its craftsmanship. Thousands of delicate stitches, carefully wrapped around a single young life, have preserved not only one individual, but the extraordinary culture that believed remembrance could be woven, thread by thread, into eternity. The fortress whose walls still bear a siege's scorch marks, on a high cliff overlooking the Euphrates River. The ruins of Dura-Europos stand in silence. Its streets are empty. Its temples have no worshippers. Its houses have long since collapsed into the desert, yet along sections of its massive defensive walls. The stone still carries the scars of one of the ancient world's most desperate sieges. Blackened patches, collapsed tunnels, and shattered fortifications remain exactly where they fell nearly 18 centuries ago. They preserve not only a ruined city, but the final moments of a battle that archaeology has reconstructed in extraordinary detail. Dura-Europos was founded around 300 BC by the Seleucid Greeks following the campaigns of Alexander the Great. Its strategic position beside the Euphrates made it an important frontier settlement, connecting the Mediterranean world with Mesopotamia. Over the centuries, the city passed through several empires. It was ruled by the Parthians, later occupied by the Romans, and eventually became one of Rome's easternmost frontier fortresses. Its population reflected this remarkable history. Greeks, Romans, Armenians, Persians, Jews, and many other peoples lived together within its walls. Few ancient cities displayed such cultural diversity. Walking through Dura-Europos would have revealed an extraordinary mixture of traditions. Greek-style streets crossed the city in an orderly grid. Roman military headquarters stood beside local houses. Temples dedicated to Greek gods shared the city with shrines honoring Persian deities. One of the world's earliest known Christian house churches stood only a short distance from one of the best-preserved ancient synagogues ever discovered. Their painted walls still survive. Together, they offer a rare glimpse into the religious diversity of the 3rd century AD. Despite its prosperity, Dura-Europos occupied a dangerous frontier. By the middle of the 3rd century AD, conflict between the Roman Empire and the rising Sasanian Persian Empire intensified. Around AD 256, Persian forces surrounded the city. What followed became one of antiquity's best documented sieges, not because ancient historians described it in detail, but because the battlefield itself survived beneath the desert. Archaeologists discovered evidence of sophisticated siege engineering unlike almost anywhere else in the Roman world. The Persian army dug tunnels beneath the city walls in an attempt to weaken their foundations. Roman defenders responded by excavating their own counter-tunnels, deep beneath the surface. The two sides met underground. It was here that one of archaeology's most remarkable discoveries was made. Inside a narrow tunnel, researchers uncovered the skeletons of nearly 20 Roman soldiers lying exactly where they had fallen. At first, their positions puzzled archaeologists. The bodies were piled together in a confined space. There appeared to have been little evidence of prolonged combat. Eventually, a different explanation emerged. Many scholars believe the Persians deliberately ignited a mixture of bitumen and sulfur inside the tunnel. The burning materials produced dense clouds of poisonous gases. As Roman soldiers advanced through the confined passage, they may have been overcome within moments. If correct, the discovery represents one of the earliest known examples of chemical warfare documented through archaeological evidence. Although alternative interpretations have been discussed, the physical evidence strongly suggests that smoke and toxic fumes played a decisive role during the underground battle. Above ground, the siege continued. The Persians eventually succeeded in breaching the defenses. The city fell, but instead of rebuilding it, the conquerors largely abandoned the settlement. Buildings collapsed where they stood. Homes remained filled with everyday possessions. Sections of the city wall were buried beneath defensive earthworks created during the final battle. Ironically, those emergency fortifications helped preserve much of the ancient city for future archaeologists. Excavations throughout the 20th century transformed our understanding of Roman frontier life. Thousands of objects emerged from the ruins: weapons, coins, military equipment, writing tablets, glass vessels, leather sandals, painted plaster. And everyday household items remained remarkably well preserved by the dry Syrian climate. Few archaeological sites have produced such a complete picture of life inside a Roman border city. Each discovery adds another piece to the story of ordinary people living under extraordinary circumstances. Perhaps the greatest legacy of Dura-Europos is not its architecture, nor its military history, but its preservation, because the city was abandoned rather than continuously occupied. Its streets remained frozen in time. Archaeologists could study homes, places of worship, military buildings, and defensive systems almost exactly as they appeared during the final years before the siege. It became one of the most important archaeological laboratories for understanding daily life in the ancient Near East. Today, many of the city's walls still stand above the Syrian desert. The siege tunnels remain beneath them. The blackened stones still bear traces of intense heat. Although nearly 18 centuries have passed, the evidence remains astonishingly clear. Dura-Europos reminds us that archaeology sometimes preserves more than monuments. It preserves moments: a collapsed tunnel, a scorched wall, a handful of soldiers who never escaped the darkness beneath the fortress. Together tell the story of a battle that history almost forgot, but the earth refused to erase. The fortress carved beneath a sleeping volcano. High in the mountains of northwestern Iran, a village appears to grow directly from the cliffs. Its homes have no separate roofs. The roof of one house often forms the courtyard of another. Windows emerge from towering pillars of stone. Doorways disappear into solid rock. From a distance, the entire settlement resembles a city sculpted by nature itself. Yet for centuries, people have lived comfortably inside these remarkable formations. This is Kandavan, one of the world's oldest continuously inhabited cave villages. Kandavan lies in Iran's East Azerbaijan province, at the foot of the long-dormant Mount Sahand volcano. The unusual rock formations surrounding the village were not carved by human hands. Thousands of years ago, powerful volcanic eruptions covered the landscape with thick layers of ash and pumice over countless centuries. Rain, wind, and seasonal freezing gradually eroded the soft volcanic material. Harder sections resisted erosion. The result was hundreds of tall, cone-shaped stone pillars rising from the valley floor. Geologists call these formations hudus. The people of Kandavan transformed them into homes. No one knows exactly when the first families settled here. Local tradition suggests that villagers fled invading Mongol armies during the 13th century and sought refuge inside the volcanic rocks. While this story remains popular, archaeologists believe human occupation may have begun even earlier. Whatever the exact date, generations of residents gradually expanded the natural caves using simple hand tools. They carved rooms, staircases, storage chambers, windows, and ventilation shafts directly into the volcanic stone, each generation added to the work of the last. The village slowly grew from the mountain itself. The volcanic rock proved surprisingly well suited for permanent habitation. It is soft enough to shape with hand tools, yet strong enough to support multiple floors. Its thick walls naturally regulate temperature. During the hot Iranian summers, the interiors remain cool. During harsh mountain winters, they retain warmth remarkably well. Long before modern insulation, the people of Kandavan had discovered an architecture perfectly adapted to their environment. Nature had already completed much of the engineering. Many homes extend across several levels. Lower rooms traditionally housed livestock or stored food. Upper chambers served as kitchens, bedrooms, and family living spaces. Narrow stairways connect one floor to another. Small windows admit daylight while helping preserve warmth. Every available surface was carefully adapted to daily life. Unlike caves formed as single large chambers, these interiors evolved gradually over centuries, each room reflecting the changing needs of the families who occupied them. Life in Kandavan depended not only on shelter, but also on the fertile valleys surrounding it. Fresh water flowed from mountain springs. Nearby fields supported agriculture. Families cultivated orchards, raised sheep and goats, and maintained small farms despite the rugged terrain. The unusual settlement offered both protection and access to valuable natural resources. Isolation did not mean hardship. Instead, the landscape shaped a sustainable way of life that endured for generations. Unlike many ancient cave settlements, Kandavan never became completely abandoned. Places such as Cappadocia in Turkey preserve magnificent rock-cut architecture, but many of their ancient dwellings eventually fell out of regular use. Kandavan followed a different path. Families continued living inside its carved stone homes from one generation to the next. Even today, children still play in narrow stone alleys. Smoke rises from chimneys cut directly into volcanic rock. Daily life continues much as it has for centuries. Archaeologists studying Kandavan focus not on buried ruins, but on a living archaeological landscape. The village demonstrates how architecture can evolve continuously without losing its ancient character. Each doorway, each carved staircase, each carefully expanded chamber preserves evidence of countless small modifications rather than one grand construction project. The settlement grew organically. Its builders responded to changing families, changing needs, and changing seasons. The result is a community shaped by time itself. Modern conservation presents unique challenges, because Kandavan remains inhabited. Preserving the village requires balancing historical protection with the practical needs of its residents. Homes require repairs. Utilities must be installed carefully. Tourism brings economic opportunity, but also increases pressure on the fragile volcanic stone. Conservationists work alongside local families to ensure that this extraordinary settlement remains both a historic monument and a living community. Today, the stone towers of Kandavan continue to rise beneath the silent slopes of Mount Sahand. Their volcanic origins stretch back hundreds of thousands of years. Their carved interiors preserve centuries of human adaptation. Unlike abandoned ruins, these ancient chambers still echo with everyday life. Meals are prepared, families gather. Children grow up within walls first shaped by nature, then patiently transformed by human hands. Kandavan reminds us that some of archaeology's greatest discoveries are not places frozen in the past, but places where the past has never truly disappeared. The fortress where an empire's border simply stopped. On the wind-swept hills of northern England, stone walls stretch across the landscape until they disappear into the horizon. For nearly 2,000 years, they have marked one of the most recognizable frontiers of the ancient world. This was not merely a defensive barrier. It was a declaration, a line where the Roman Empire chose to end. Among the many forts built along this immense frontier, none captures its purpose more clearly than Housted's Roman fort. Standing high above the surrounding valleys, it watched a border that separated two very different worlds. Housted's was constructed around AD 124, only a few years after Emperor Hadrian ordered the building of the Great Wall that now bears his name. The emperor had abandoned the policy of endless expansion. Rather than pushing Rome's borders farther north, he chose to define them. Hadrian's wall eventually stretched nearly 117 kilometers from the River Tyne in the east to the Solway Firth in the west. It became one of the greatest engineering projects ever undertaken by the Roman Empire. Housted's occupied one of its highest and most strategically important positions. The location was carefully chosen, perched atop the rugged Windsill escarpment. The fort commanded sweeping views across the surrounding countryside. Roman soldiers stationed here could watch for movement many kilometers away. To the north lay the lands inhabited by various British tribes that remained outside Roman control. To the south stretched the organized provinces of Roman Britain. The wall itself became more than a physical obstacle. It represented the edge of Roman law, Roman taxation, and Roman authority. Beyond it, imperial control simply stopped. Although often imagined as an impenetrable military barrier, Hadrian's Wall functioned in many different ways. It slowed movement rather than preventing it completely. Controlled gateways allowed merchants, travelers, messengers, and local communities to cross legally. Roman officials inspected goods, collected taxes, and monitored those entering imperial territory. The frontier became both a defensive system and a carefully managed customs border. Housesteads played a central role in maintaining that balance. The fort itself was a remarkably self-contained community. Around 800 soldiers could be stationed there at one time. Barracks lined the interior streets. Command headquarters occupied the center. Granaries stored enough grain to feed hundreds of men through long northern winters. A hospital treated injuries and illness. Workshops repaired armor, weapons, shoes, and everyday equipment. Within the stone walls, the Roman army created a functioning town capable of operating independently for extended periods. One of Housestead's most remarkable surviving features is its system of stone latrines. Unlike many ancient settlements, the fort possessed carefully engineered communal toilets connected to flowing water. Fresh water entered through stone channels, carrying waste away from the buildings. It was a practical example of Roman engineering applied even at the empire's most distant frontier. Nearby, a sophisticated network of drains managed rainwater and protected the fort from flooding. Even on the edge of the known world, Roman standards of infrastructure remained impressively high. Life for the soldiers stationed here was often challenging. Northern Britain offered little resemblance to the warmer provinces of Italy, Gaul, or Spain. Cold winds swept across the exposed hills throughout much of the year. Rain frequently turned roads into mud. Winter frosts covered the surrounding landscape. Many soldiers serving at Housesteads had been recruited from distant parts of the empire, including modern Belgium, Germany, and the Netherlands. For many, Britain must have seemed unimaginably remote. Archaeological excavations have revealed thousands of everyday objects left behind by these frontier soldiers. Leather sandals, iron tools, bronze brooches, gaming pieces, writing tablets, pottery coins, animal bones, and fragments of clothing all survived beneath the soil. Together, they reveal lives that extended far beyond military duty. Soldiers wrote letters, played games, cooked meals, raised families, and formed communities alongside local civilians living outside the fort. The frontier was not simply a battlefield. It was a place where cultures met every single day. Beyond the walls of Housesteads, small civilian settlements gradually developed. Merchants supplied food, craftsmen repaired equipment, families established homes near the military garrison. Although these communities officially lay outside the fort, their survival depended upon the Roman presence. Trade flourished. Local traditions blended with Roman customs. The frontier became less a dividing line than a place of constant interaction between different peoples. As Roman power weakened during the early 5th century, the garrison eventually departed. Maintenance of the wall ceased. Buildings slowly collapsed. Stone from the abandoned fort was reused in nearby farms and villages. Yet remarkably, large sections of Housesteads survived. Its defensive walls, barracks, granaries, and headquarters remain among the best preserved Roman military ruins anywhere in Europe. They allow archaeologists to reconstruct daily life on Rome's northern frontier with extraordinary precision. Today, visitors standing atop the ancient ramparts can still look north across the rolling hills, much as Roman sentries once did. The empire they served disappeared more than 1,500 years ago. The soldiers are long gone. The frontier no longer divides kingdoms. Yet the stone walls continue to mark the place where one of history's greatest civilizations deliberately chose not to advance any farther. Housesteads reminds us that every empire has an edge, a point where ambition meets geography, and where even the mightiest power eventually decides. This is far enough, the desert fortress that time forgot, along the edge of Morocco's high Atlas Mountains, where the fertile valleys give way to the vast Sahara. An immense city of earth rises above the riverbank. Its towers glow deep red beneath the afternoon sun. Its walls seem almost indistinguishable from the surrounding hills. From a distance, it appears less like a human settlement than a natural extension of the landscape itself. This is Ait Benhaddou, one of the finest surviving fortified cities of the ancient caravan routes. For centuries, travelers crossing the Sahara passed through this remarkable settlement. Long caravans carrying salt, gold, ivory, spices, textiles. and precious stones followed routes connecting West Africa with the great cities of Morocco. Crossing the desert was dangerous. The journey could take weeks or even months. Water was scarce. Bandits posed constant threats. A secure place to rest became essential. Ait Benhaddou provided exactly that. Its towering walls protected merchants, animals, and valuable cargo before the long journey continued north. The settlement is known as a Hissar, a traditional fortified village built almost entirely from compacted earth. Although the present structures largely date from the 17th century, the location itself had been occupied for many centuries before. Its position beside the Onila Valley made it an ideal stopping point along one of Morocco's most important trade corridors. Generation after generation expanded the settlement, adding homes, storehouses, granaries, and defensive towers while preserving the same architectural traditions. Unlike castles built from stone, nearly every building in Ait Benhaddou was constructed from materials gathered nearby. Builders mixed clay, mud, straw, and small stones into thick walls known as rammed earth. Wooden beams from local trees supported ceilings and upper floors. The construction blended perfectly with the surrounding landscape. From a military perspective, this offered an unexpected advantage. The fortress became remarkably difficult to distinguish from the hills until travelers approached quite closely. The design of the Hissar reflected both security and community. High defensive walls surrounded tightly packed homes. A single fortified entrance controlled access. Narrow alleyways wound between buildings, making movement difficult for any invading force. Families lived close together, often sharing walls with neighboring houses. Storage rooms occupied lower floors. Living quarters stood above. Granaries protected valuable harvests from both thieves and harsh weather. Every element of the settlement reflected centuries of adaptation to desert life. Towering above the village, a fortified granary crowned the highest hill. From this position, guards could observe the surrounding valley for many kilometers. Approaching caravans became visible long before they reached the gates. In times of danger, villagers could retreat to the highest defensive structures while watching every road leading toward the settlement. The elevated position transformed the entire Hissar into a naturally fortified stronghold. Archaeologists studying Ait Benhaddou are often fascinated not by buried ruins, but by living architecture. Unlike many ancient settlements abandoned after war or disaster, this village evolved gradually over hundreds of years. Walls were repaired, rooms expanded, towers rebuilt. Each generation left subtle traces of its presence, rather than uncovering a single frozen moment in time. Researchers observe centuries of continuous adaptation preserved within the same streets. The greatest enemy of Ait Benhaddou has never been invading armies. It has always been nature. Earth architecture requires constant maintenance. Seasonal rains gradually erode. Exposed walls. Wind slowly removes fine layers of clay. Without regular repairs, entire buildings can collapse surprisingly quickly. For hundreds of years, local families renewed damaged walls using the same traditional techniques employed by their ancestors. The village survived because each generation accepted responsibility for preserving it. Modern conservation presents both opportunities and challenges. As tourism increased during the 20th century, many residents chose to build newer homes across the nearby river where electricity, modern plumbing, and improved roads became available. Only a handful of families continue to live within the ancient Hissar today. Even so, the village remains an extraordinary example of traditional earthen architecture. Its preservation has become an international priority. Restoration teams work carefully to maintain original construction methods rather than replacing the ancient walls with modern materials. Today, the red towers of Ait Benhaddou still overlook the caravan route that once connected the Sahara with the Mediterranean world. The merchants are gone. The camel caravans have largely disappeared. The bustling marketplaces have fallen quiet. Yet the fortress continues to stand almost exactly as generations of travelers would have seen it centuries ago. Its earthen walls remind us that history is not always preserved in marble or carved into granite. Sometimes it survives in simple clay, patiently rebuilt by countless hands, allowing an entire civilization's way of life to endure beneath the same desert sun that first gave it form. The city where a trading empire simply stopped trading, facing the calm waters of the Mediterranean. The ruined city of Sabratha stretches along Libya's northern coast. Broken columns rise above the shoreline. Temples stand without their roofs. Stone streets lead toward a harbor that no longer welcomes ships. Today, the sea is quiet, but there was a time when this coastline echoed with dozens of languages. Merchants from every corner of the ancient world gathered here. making Sabratha one of North Africa's busiest trading ports. Then, almost without warning, the commerce that sustained the city slowly came to an end. Sabratha was founded by the Phoenicians sometime during the first millennium BC. These remarkable seafarers established trading colonies across the Mediterranean, linking distant civilizations through commerce rather than conquest. Its position along the Gulf of Sidra made Sabratha an ideal stopping point for ships traveling between the eastern Mediterranean, Carthage, and the western provinces. It soon became part of a powerful network of coastal cities known as the Tripolitanian settlements, alongside Oea, modern Tripoli, and Leptis Magna, together. They controlled important maritime trade across North Africa. The city's greatest wealth came from its ability to connect two very different worlds. Ships arrived from Greece, Egypt, Italy, and the Levant carrying wine, olive oil, fine pottery, glass, and luxury goods. Caravans traveling north across the Sahara brought gold, ivory, exotic animals, salt, leather, and other valuable products from sub-Saharan Africa. Sabratha became the meeting point where desert commerce merged with Mediterranean trade. Its markets never remained quiet for long. When Rome absorbed North Africa during the 1st century BC, the city entered its most prosperous era. Roman investment transformed Sabratha into a magnificent urban center. Wide paved streets crossed the city. Public baths offered places for relaxation and conversation. Markets expanded. Temples honored both Roman and local deities. Elegant villas overlooked the sea. Monumental gateways celebrated imperial authority. Prosperity reached nearly every corner of the settlement. Perhaps no structure better reflects that prosperity than Sabratha's magnificent theater. Built during the 2nd century AD, it remains one of the finest surviving Roman theaters anywhere in the world. Its towering 3-story stage rises almost intact, decorated with richly carved columns, statues, and elaborate architectural details. Thousands of spectators once gathered here to watch dramas, musical performances, public ceremonies, and political announcements. Even today, the theater demonstrates the extraordinary skill of Roman architects working far from the heart of the empire. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of an equally diverse religious life. Temples dedicated to Roman gods stood beside shrines reflecting older Punic traditions inherited from the Phoenicians. Later, Christian churches appeared as the Roman Empire gradually embraced Christianity. Each new generation reshaped the city's spiritual landscape without completely erasing the past. The changing architecture mirrors the changing beliefs of the people who called Sabratha home. Excavations have revealed an astonishing variety of everyday objects: imported marble, bronze statues, glass vessels, coins, oil lamps, fishing equipment, ceramics, and beautifully crafted mosaics all survived beneath the ruins. These discoveries reveal a prosperous population deeply connected to international trade. Many luxury items originated hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away. Their presence demonstrates how thoroughly Sabratha participated in the economic life of the Mediterranean world. Yet prosperity depended upon one fragile condition: trade had to continue. During the 3rd and 4th centuries, political instability spread across the Roman Empire. Economic difficulties affected long-distance commerce, trade routes shifted, piracy became more dangerous. Changing patterns of regional power gradually reduced the city's importance. Then nature delivered additional blows. Several powerful earthquakes damaged many public buildings, including parts of the harbor infrastructure upon which the city depended. Although rebuilding efforts followed, Sabratha never fully recovered its former influence. As maritime commerce increasingly concentrated elsewhere, the harbor that had once welcomed countless merchant vessels grew quieter. Fewer caravans reached the city. Fewer ships unloaded cargo along its quays. The magnificent public buildings remained standing, but the economic engine that supported them slowly faded. Unlike cities destroyed by sudden catastrophe, Sabratha declined gradually. Generation after generation witnessed a little less activity than the one before. Eventually, the great trading city simply ceased to function as the commercial crossroads it had once been. Centuries later, wind-blown sand covered much of the abandoned settlement. Ironically, that same sand protected many structures from later destruction. 20th century archaeological excavations revealed streets, homes, temples, bathhouses, and the extraordinary theater in remarkable condition, together. They preserve one of the clearest pictures of urban life in Roman North Africa. Every column, every mosaic, every weathered stone tells the story of a city built not upon conquest, but upon connection. Today, visitors walking through the ruins hear only the sound of waves reaching the ancient shoreline. The merchants have vanished, The caravans no longer emerge from the southern deserts. The crowded marketplaces have fallen silent, yet the city itself remains. Sabratha reminds us that great civilizations are sustained not only by armies or emperors, but by the countless exchanges of people, ideas, and goods. And when those connections finally disappear, even the busiest port can become little more than a quiet memory beside the sea. The fortress where a border war ended in silence. Across the dry plains of southeastern Turkey, massive stone walls rise above the landscape. Broken towers still guard empty streets. Beneath the surface, entire chambers disappear into the bedrock. Vast underground cisterns remain cool even after centuries of abandonment. This is Deir, one of the greatest Roman frontier fortresses ever constructed. For generations, it stood at the heart of one of history's longest border conflicts. Then, the struggle that had shaped its existence slowly faded away, leaving behind a fortress whose silence became its final victory. Deir was founded around AD 507 during the reign of the Byzantine Emperor Anastasius I. Its purpose was unmistakable. Only a short distance to the east lay the powerful Sasanian Persian Empire. For centuries, Rome and Persia had competed for control of the Near East. Neither empire could easily defeat the other. Instead, they constructed heavily fortified cities along their shared frontier. Dara became the Byzantine Empire's greatest military stronghold on this contested border. The location was chosen with extraordinary care. Although the surrounding plains appeared open and exposed, natural ridges provided commanding views across the countryside. Roads connecting Mesopotamia with Anatolia passed nearby. Any army advancing westward would likely encounter Dara. Likewise, Byzantine forces marching east could use the fortress as their principal military base. It was designed not simply to resist attack, but to project imperial power deep into the frontier. Engineers transformed the landscape itself. Enormous defensive walls enclosed the city. Dozens of towers strengthened vulnerable sections. Wide moats added another layer of protection. Some stretches of the fortifications reached nearly 20 meters in height. Powerful gates controlled every entrance. Behind these walls, barracks housed thousands of soldiers. Storehouses contained supplies for prolonged campaigns. Workshops repaired weapons, armor, and siege equipment. The city functioned as a complete military headquarters prepared for extended war. Perhaps the most remarkable achievement lay beneath the streets. Water was essential for any fortress expected to survive a siege. Engineers carved enormous underground reservoirs directly into the limestone. Aqueducts carried water into the city, where it could be stored safely beyond the reach of enemy attacks. These immense cisterns ensured that defenders could withstand long periods of isolation. Even today, many remain astonishingly well preserved, demonstrating the remarkable engineering skills of Byzantine builders. Deir soon became the setting for one of antiquity's most famous battles. In AD 530, a Byzantine army commanded by the young general Belisarius confronted a much larger Sasanian force outside the city's walls. Rather than relying solely upon the fortress, Belisarius carefully prepared the battlefield. Defensive trenches disrupted enemy cavalry. Infantry held the center. Hidden cavalry units waited for the right moment to strike. When the Persian attack finally came, the Byzantine defenses held. A decisive counterattack forced the invading army to retreat. The Battle of Deir became one of the greatest victories of the early Byzantine Empire. Yet triumph proved temporary. The border war continued for decades. Control of frontier cities shifted repeatedly. Armies marched across the region year after year. In AD 573, the Sasanians finally captured Deir after a determined siege. The loss shocked Constantinople. The fortress that had symbolized Byzantine strength now belonged to its greatest rival over the following generations. The city changed hands several more times, reflecting the constant uncertainty of life along the imperial frontier. Archaeological excavations reveal far more than military history. Researchers have uncovered churches, markets, homes, workshops, pottery, coins, glassware, and sophisticated drainage systems. Thousands of civilians lived alongside soldiers within the protective walls. Merchants supplied the garrison. Craftsmen produced everyday necessities. Children grew up in streets overshadowed by massive fortifications, even in a city built for war. Ordinary life continued. One of Deir's most extraordinary discoveries lies outside its walls. A vast rock-cut necropolis contains hundreds of tombs carved directly into the limestone. Nearby, archaeologists uncovered an enormous underground burial chamber, often called the mass grave gallery. The exact circumstances surrounding those buried there remain uncertain. Some may have died during epidemics. Others could have been casualties of the repeated wars that engulfed the frontier. Their identities remain largely unknown. but together they reflect the heavy human cost of centuries of conflict. Eventually, the balance of power across the Near East changed completely. The exhausting wars between Byzantium and Persia weakened both empires. During the 7th century, the rapid expansion of early Islamic armies transformed the political landscape. Ancient frontiers lost their importance. The great border that Dara had been built to defend effectively disappeared. Without an active frontier, the fortress gradually lost its strategic purpose. Its soldiers departed. Its markets declined. Its walls remained. But the war they had been built to fight had simply ended. Today, the stone towers of Dara still overlook the plains where rival empires once faced one another. Its underground reservoirs remain cool beneath the earth. Its empty streets preserve the outline of a city shaped almost entirely by military necessity. The border it defended no longer exists. The kingdoms that fought over it have long since vanished. Yet the fortress endures. Dara reminds us that every frontier is temporary. Even the longest wars eventually fall silent, leaving only weathered walls to remember where two great empires once stood face to face. The city where an entire guild of craftsmen vanished, hidden among the barren hills of western Egypt. Far from the fertile fields of the Nile lies the remains of an ordinary-looking village. Its narrow streets are lined with small stone houses. Low walls divide quiet courtyards. Simple doorways open into rooms where families once cooked, worked, and slept. At first glance, it appears little different from countless other ancient settlements. Yet the people who lived here possessed skills unlike anyone else in Egypt. They were the craftsmen entrusted with creating the eternal homes of the pharaohs. This was Deir el-Medina, a village whose inhabitants built the magnificent tombs of the Valley of the Kings, before disappearing into history. The village was established during the 18th dynasty, probably under Thutmose I in the 16th century BC. Its purpose was highly specialized. Rather than serving farmers or merchants, it housed a carefully selected community of stonecutters, painters, sculptors, carpenters, draftsmen, and master artisans. Their responsibility was extraordinary, every day. They crossed the desert to excavate and decorate the royal tombs hidden beneath the cliffs nearby. Few people in Egypt possessed greater artistic skill. Even fewer were trusted with such important work. Because these craftsmen knew the locations of royal tombs filled with unimaginable wealth, security was essential. The village stood in an isolated valley, separated from nearby settlements by rugged hills. Entry was carefully controlled. Officials kept detailed records of attendance. Workers followed organized schedules, typically laboring for 8 days before returning home for 2 days of rest. The community functioned almost like a self-contained institution, supported directly by the Egyptian state. Archaeologists often describe Deir el-Medina as one of the best documented communities from the ancient world. Thousands of written records survived here. Unlike monumental inscriptions celebrating kings, these texts preserve the voices of ordinary people, letters between family members, shopping lists, medical treatments, legal disputes, religious prayers, even personal complaints. Together, they reveal daily life with remarkable intimacy. Instead of seeing ancient Egypt through the eyes of pharaohs, we encounter it through the lives of the people who built their monuments. The craftsmen themselves were remarkably educated. Many could read and write, an uncommon ability in ancient Egypt. Scribes recorded almost every aspect of village life on pieces of broken pottery known as ostraca. These inexpensive writing surfaces became notebooks, receipts, practice exercises, and official records. Thousands have been recovered. Some contain sketches of unfinished tomb decorations. Others preserve humorous drawings, poetry, or messages exchanged between neighbors. Few archaeological sites provide such a vivid picture of everyday life. Life in Deir el-Medina was not without hardship. The desert climate was unforgiving. Fresh water had to be brought from outside the settlement. Food supplies depended upon regular deliveries from government officials. When shipments arrived late, the entire community suffered. One remarkable document records what many historians consider the world's earliest known labor strike. During the reign of Ramesses III, workers refused to continue building royal tombs after repeated delays in receiving their grain wages. Rather than resorting to violence, they organized peaceful protests, demanding the supplies promised to them. Eventually, officials were forced to respond. The strike reminds us that even those serving divine kings expected fairness in return for their labor. The village also reveals a deeply personal side of ancient Egyptian belief. Nearly every household contained small shrines honoring protective deities. Families prayed for healthy children, successful births, and protection from illness. Magic and religion blended naturally with everyday life. Workers who decorated magnificent royal tombs also sought divine help for their own modest homes. Their faith extended beyond grand temples into the smallest corners of domestic life. Excavations have uncovered an extraordinary range of objects. Paintbrushes still stained with pigment, stone chisels worn smooth through years of use, wooden mallets, bronze tools, pigment jars, furniture, sandals, jewelry, children's toys, musical instruments. Each discovery helps reconstruct a community whose identity centered upon craftsmanship. These were not anonymous laborers. Many left signatures inside royal tombs. Some artists developed recognizable styles, allowing modern researchers to identify individual hands across multiple monuments. For nearly 5 centuries, the village flourished. Generation after generation inherited both homes and professions. Fathers taught sons. Master craftsmen trained apprentices. The knowledge required to carve perfect hieroglyphs, paint delicate scenes, and shape solid limestone passed from one family to the next. But toward the end of the New Kingdom, Egypt entered a period of political instability. Royal authority weakened. Economic difficulties spread. Construction of lavish royal tombs slowed dramatically, without continuous commissions. The purpose of Deir el-Medina gradually disappeared. Families began to leave. The workshops fell silent. The village that had existed solely to serve the pharaohs slowly emptied. Today, the streets of Deir el-Medina remain remarkably well preserved beneath the Egyptian sun. The workshops are quiet. The paintbrushes have long since dried. The voices recorded on broken pottery survive even though the craftsmen themselves are gone, unlike the kings whose tombs they created. Most of these artisans are remembered not through statues or monuments, but through the ordinary traces of their daily lives. Their abandoned village reminds us that behind every great civilization stand countless skilled hands. People whose names are often forgotten, yet whose work continues to shape history thousands of years after they quietly laid down their tools. The fortress where a border dispute ended in total silence. Beyond the broad plains of southeastern Turkey, clusters of ancient mud-brick domes rise above the horizon. Stone walls emerge from the earth beside abandoned streets. Fragments of fortifications still overlook the surrounding countryside. For thousands of years, this settlement stood where civilizations met, where trade routes crossed, and where rival empires watched one another across an uncertain frontier. This is Harran, a city whose strategic position made it one of history's most contested border strongholds. Yet after centuries of conflict, the frontier that defined its existence quietly disappeared, leaving only silence where armies once gathered. Harran is among the oldest continuously inhabited settlements in the Near East. Archaeological evidence suggests people lived here as early as the 3rd millennium BC. Its location proved almost impossible to ignore. The city lay at the intersection of major caravan routes linking Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the eastern Mediterranean. Merchants carrying textiles, metals, spices, precious stones, and grain regularly passed through its gates, long before becoming a fortress. Harran had already become a crossroads of civilizations. The city was equally important for another reason. Its fertile surroundings offered reliable water in an otherwise dry landscape. Nearby springs sustained agriculture while supporting travelers moving across northern Mesopotamia. Any kingdom hoping to control commerce between east and west recognized Harran's strategic value. As one empire expanded, another inevitably challenged its authority. For centuries, control of Harran changed repeatedly. Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, and later Islamic dynasties all governed the city at different times. Each understood that whoever held Harran controlled one of the region's most valuable gateways. During the Roman and Byzantine periods, Harran became a frontier city positioned close to the eastern borders of the empire. Beyond those borders stood first the Parthian Empire, then later the powerful Sasanian Persians. These rival empires fought intermittent wars for hundreds of years. The frontier shifted again and again, sometimes only a few kilometers at a time. Harran became both a commercial center and a defensive stronghold, preparing constantly for the possibility of invasion. Its fortifications reflected this uncertain world. Powerful defensive walls surrounded the settlement. Massive gates controlled movement into the city. Watchtowers overlooked the surrounding plains, allowing defenders to observe approaching armies long before they reached the walls. Inside, barracks, storage buildings, markets, and religious centers coexisted within the fortified enclosure. The city served both soldiers and civilians, its economy depending as much upon commerce as military preparedness. Harran also became famous for its intellectual and religious traditions. For centuries, It remained one of the last important centers devoted to the ancient Mesopotamian moon god Sin, even after many neighboring regions adopted new religions. The temple at Harran continued attracting pilgrims. Later, the city became known for its scholars, astronomers, mathematicians, and translators. Greek scientific knowledge, Persian learning, and Mesopotamian traditions all met within its walls, rather than existing only as a military fortress. Harran became a place where ideas crossed borders as easily as merchants. Archaeological excavations have revealed impressive remains from many different periods. Sections of the city walls still survive. The Great Citadel dominates part of the ancient settlement. Ruins of mosques, bathhouses, markets, and domestic buildings reveal continuous occupation over thousands of years. Countless pottery fragments, coins, glass vessels, metal tools, and inscriptions illustrate the remarkable diversity of cultures that once flourished here. Few ancient cities preserve such a long and uninterrupted historical record. One of the most famous events associated with Harran occurred in AD 53. The Roman general Crassus, one of the wealthiest men in Rome, and a member of the first triumvirate alongside Julius Caesar and Pompey, marched east hoping to conquer Parthia, near Harran. His army suffered one of Rome's greatest military disasters at the Battle of Carrhae. Parthian cavalry surrounded the Roman legions, using highly mobile horse archers to devastating effect. Crassus was killed, and thousands of Roman soldiers never returned home. The defeat permanently altered Roman strategy along the eastern frontier. Yet despite repeated wars, no empire held Harran forever. The border itself kept changing. New dynasties emerged, old kingdoms collapsed. When Islamic armies expanded across the Near East during the 7th century, the centuries-long Roman-Persian frontier effectively vanished. The great border disputes that had defined Harran's strategic importance simply ceased to exist. The city remained inhabited, but no longer stood at the edge of rival superpowers. Its walls gradually became less essential, its soldiers fewer, its military role quietly faded. Over later centuries, trade routes shifted elsewhere. Political centers moved. Economic priorities changed, although Harran continued to exist. It never regained the international importance it had once enjoyed. Many of its monumental buildings fell into ruin. The famous mud brick beehive houses that still characterize the region represent a much later chapter in the city's long history, built among the remains of civilizations that had already disappeared. Today, visitors walk through weathered fortifications, broken gateways, and the remains of temples and medieval structures layered across thousands of years. The border that once made Harran indispensable can no longer be seen. The rival empires that fought endlessly over this land have long since vanished. Only the stones remain, quiet witnesses to a place where geography shaped history for millennia. Harran reminds us that borders are rarely permanent. The lines that once divided civilizations can disappear entirely, leaving behind only abandoned walls and the memory of conflicts that the landscape itself has long since forgotten. The temple complex buried beneath a shifting sand ridge, on the edge of Yemen's vast desert, where the fertile plains gradually disappear beneath endless dunes. The broken columns of an ancient sanctuary emerge from the sand. Stone gateways stand beneath an open sky. Massive carved pillars cast long shadows across the desert floor. In some seasons, wind carries fresh layers of sand across the ruins, concealing walls that had stood exposed only months before. For centuries, the desert itself became both the temple's greatest enemy and its greatest protector. This is the Temple of Awam, near the ancient city of Marib, one of the most sacred places of the Kingdom of Saba, long before the Roman Empire reached its greatest power. Southern Arabia was home to one of the wealthiest kingdoms in the ancient world. The Kingdom of Saba, known to many through traditions surrounding the Queen of Sheba, flourished between the first millennium BC and the early centuries AD. Its prosperity depended upon a commodity more valuable than gold in many distant lands: frankincense, along with myrrh. These fragrant resins traveled thousands of kilometers by camel caravan, eventually reaching Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, and Rome. Marib became one of the principal cities controlling this remarkable trade. The city's success depended upon more than commerce. Nearby stood one of antiquity's greatest engineering achievements, the Great Marib Dam, built and rebuilt over many centuries. The dam collected seasonal floodwaters and distributed them across vast agricultural fields. In an otherwise arid landscape, it transformed the desert into fertile farmland. Reliable harvests supported a growing population, funded ambitious construction projects, and helped sustain the kingdom's influence for generations. At the spiritual heart of this prosperous civilization stood the Temple of Awam, dedicated to the moon god Al-Makah, the The sanctuary attracted pilgrims from across southern Arabia. Religious ceremonies, political gatherings, and royal dedications all took place within its sacred enclosure. For the people of Saba, the temple represented far more than a place of worship. It symbolized divine protection over both the kingdom and the precious trade routes that brought its wealth. Its architecture remains among the most distinctive in Arabia. Visitors entered through an impressive oval enclosure nearly 300 meters in circumference. Massive limestone walls surrounded the sacred complex. At its entrance, rows of enormous stone pillars welcomed worshippers. Each monolithic column stood several meters high, carved with remarkable precision despite the limited tools available to ancient builders. The symmetry of the complex reflected careful planning, combining religious symbolism with extraordinary engineering. Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of inscriptions throughout the temple. Kings recorded victories. Merchants dedicated offerings. Pilgrims expressed gratitude for safe journeys. Officials documented construction projects, religious ceremonies, and public works. These inscriptions, written in the ancient South Arabian script, have become one of the richest surviving sources for understanding the civilization of Saba, rather than relying solely upon foreign accounts. Researchers can now hear the voices of the kingdom itself. Excavations have revealed remarkable ceremonial objects, stone altars, bronze figurines, decorated incense burners, fine pottery, jewelry, seal impressions, animal bones left from ritual sacrifices. Together, these discoveries demonstrate that the temple functioned continuously for centuries, far from being an isolated monument. It remained an active center of religious and civic life, welcoming generations of worshippers, whose names are now carved into its walls. Then, the kingdom's fortunes slowly began to change. Long-distance trade routes evolved. Maritime commerce increasingly replaced overland caravan networks. The wealth that had once flowed through Marib gradually declined. Even more significant, the Great Marib Dam required constant maintenance. As political authority weakened, repairs became increasingly difficult. Eventually, sections of the dam failed. Agricultural production suffered. Communities that had depended upon reliable irrigation began to disperse, without the economic strength that had sustained it. The Great Temple slowly lost its central role. Nature completed what history had begun, season after season. Powerful desert winds carried enormous quantities of sand across the abandoned sanctuary. Gradually, walls disappeared beneath drifting dunes. Courtyards vanished. Columns became partially buried. For centuries, only fragments of the temple remained visible above the shifting landscape. Ironically, the very sand that concealed the complex also protected much of its architecture from later destruction, hidden beneath the desert. The sanctuary waited quietly for archaeologists to uncover it once again. Modern excavations have transformed our understanding of ancient Arabia. Beneath the accumulated sand, researchers uncovered monumental gateways, inscribed stone blocks, sacred courtyards, drainage systems, and sections of the enormous oval enclosure. Every new discovery reveals that southern Arabia possessed sophisticated architecture, advanced engineering, and a highly organized religious tradition long before many neighboring civilizations reached their peak. The Temple of Al-Wam stands as one of the greatest archaeological treasures of the Arabian Peninsula. Today, the desert continues its slow work. Wind still moves across the ruins, carrying grains of sand through the same columns that once welcomed pilgrims more than 2,000 years ago. The caravans have disappeared. The kingdom of Saba has long since passed into history, but the temple remains, partially buried, partially revealed, standing quietly between stone and sand. It reminds us that history is not always erased by conquest. Sometimes, it is simply covered, patiently waiting beneath the shifting dunes until the desert chooses to give it back once again. The stone field where every monument faces a forgotten past. Across the rolling highlands of central Ethiopia, dozens of towering stone pillars rise silently from the grass. Some stand perfectly upright. Others lean gently after centuries of wind and rain. Several have fallen, their carved surfaces still visible where they rest upon the earth. No temples surround them. No royal palace overlooks the field. No ancient city stretches across the landscape. Instead, the monuments stand almost alone, guarding a mystery that archaeologists have yet to fully explain. This is the Tia Stellae Field, one of Africa's most remarkable archaeological sites, where an unknown people left behind an extraordinary collection of carved stone monuments before quietly disappearing from history. The stelae of Tia are believed to have been erected sometime between the 11th and 13th centuries AD, although Ethiopia possesses one of the world's longest recorded histories. The people responsible for these monuments remain largely unidentified. They left no surviving written chronicles, no royal inscriptions, no historical records describing their rulers or beliefs. Instead, their history survives almost entirely through the stones themselves. Each monument has become a silent witness to a civilization whose identity remains only partially understood. Today, archaeologists have documented more than 30 standing stelae at Tepe, although many additional examples exist throughout the surrounding region. Together, they form part of a much larger cultural tradition found across southern Ethiopia. Yet Tepe remains the finest preserved and most elaborate of these sites. Its remarkable concentration of monuments earned it recognition as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Even now, researchers continue searching nearby landscapes for additional burial grounds and carved stones connected to the same mysterious culture. The monuments themselves are striking. Many stand between 2 and 5 meters tall, carved from single blocks of volcanic stone. Unlike Egyptian obelisks, these stelae are covered with intricate geometric symbols. One of the most recognizable carvings resembles a sword, appearing repeatedly across many monuments. Other designs include intersecting circles, parallel lines, plant-like patterns, and mysterious abstract symbols whose meanings remain uncertain. Each stone appears carefully planned rather than randomly decorated. For many years, the purpose of these carvings puzzled archaeologists. Were they religious symbols, family emblems, military achievements, or something entirely different? Excavations gradually revealed an important clue. Many stelae stand directly above human burials. Skeletons, grave goods, and burial chambers were discovered beneath several monuments. This strongly suggests that the stones served as funerary markers commemorating individuals buried below, rather than celebrating kingdoms. The monuments may have honored respected members of local communities. The sword motif has generated particular interest. Some researchers believe it represents warriors, suggesting that certain individuals buried at Tepe held military status. Others argue that the symbol carried broader spiritual or ceremonial meaning, without written records. No interpretation can be considered certain. The carvings continue to challenge modern scholars, offering clues while withholding definitive answers. It is this balance between evidence and uncertainty that makes Tepe so fascinating. Archaeological excavations have uncovered pottery, stone tools, metal objects, beads, and fragments of everyday life surrounding the burial area. These discoveries indicate that the builders possessed sophisticated craftsmanship, participated in regional trade, and maintained organized communities. The quality of the stone carving demonstrates remarkable technical skill. Transporting, shaping, and erecting monuments weighing several tons would have required careful planning, specialized labor, and cooperation across the community. Unlike many famous archaeological sites, Tepe does not preserve enormous temples or vast cities. Its importance lies elsewhere. It reveals that complex societies developed across parts of sub-Saharan Africa in ways that remain poorly understood. Too often, ancient African history has been viewed only through the civilizations of Egypt or the Mediterranean. Tepe reminds us that many other sophisticated cultures flourished independently, leaving behind monuments every bit as intriguing as those found elsewhere in the ancient world. Eventually, the people who created these monuments disappeared. Whether they gradually migrated, merged with neighboring communities, or experienced political decline remains uncertain. The stelae themselves remained standing long after their builders were gone. Generations passed, languages changed. Kingdoms rose and fell across the Ethiopian highlands. The original meaning of the carvings slowly faded from memory. By the time modern archaeologists arrived, the stones had already guarded their secrets for centuries. Nature has both threatened and protected the site. Rain, wind, vegetation, and earthquakes have damaged several monuments. Some collapsed long ago. Others developed deep cracks across their carved surfaces. Conservation efforts now work to stabilize the remaining stelae, ensuring that future generations can continue studying one of Africa's most enigmatic archaeological landscapes. Each preserved monument offers another opportunity to understand a civilization that left almost no written trace of its existence. Today, the grass still moves gently between the ancient stones. The carved swords, circles, and mysterious symbols continue facing the same horizon they have watched for nearly 1,000 years. The people who raised them are gone, their language has fallen silent. Their names are forgotten, yet their monuments remain. The Tepe Stele field reminds us that history is not measured only by surviving books or royal chronicles. Sometimes, entire civilizations leave behind nothing more than carefully carved stones, waiting patiently for future generations to ask the questions their builders never had the chance to answer. The fortress left standing after a steppe tribe simply left, high in the remote mountains of southern Siberia, on a small island surrounded by a cold alpine lake. The outline of a vast rectangular fortress still dominates the landscape. Massive earthen walls rise from the grass. Crumbling gateways face the empty shoreline. Within the enclosure, the foundations of dozens of buildings remain carefully arranged, as though their occupants intended to return at any moment, yet they never did. There are no signs of a final battle, no evidence of widespread destruction, no indication of a violent conquest. Instead, the people who built this remarkable fortress simply disappeared, leaving behind one of Asia's most puzzling archaeological mysteries. This is Pourbajan. Pourbajan lies in the modern Russian Republic of Tuva, close to the border with Mongolia. The fortress occupies a small island in Lake Terikol, nearly 2,000 meters above sea level. Its isolation immediately raises questions. Why would anyone construct such a massive complex in a place so difficult to reach? Even today, travel to the site requires crossing rugged mountains and remote valleys. For the builders, the challenge would have been even greater. Yet they invested enormous effort into creating one of the largest monumental structures in the region. Modern scientific dating has placed the construction of Pourbajan in the 8th century AD. At that time, much of Central Asia was dominated by the Uyghur Khaganate, a powerful confederation of Turkic-speaking nomadic peoples who controlled vast stretches of the Eurasian steppe. Unlike earlier steppe empires, the Uyghurs established permanent administrative centers, maintained diplomatic relations with Tang China, and adopted increasingly sophisticated forms of government. Pourbajan appears to have emerged during this remarkable period of political transformation. The fortress itself is extraordinary. Its outer walls form a nearly perfect rectangle measuring approximately 215 by 162 meters. Massive earthen ramparts once supported timber defenses. A monumental southern gateway provided the principal entrance. Inside, archaeologists identified courtyards, wooden halls, residential buildings, storehouses, and ceremonial spaces carefully arranged according to a symmetrical plan. The entire complex displays an architectural precision rarely associated with the nomadic societies of the Eurasian steppe. Many aspects of the design resemble contemporary Chinese architecture. The central buildings were arranged along a carefully planned north-south axis. Courtyards divided different sections of the complex. Roof tiles, decorative ceramics, and construction techniques all suggest strong influence from the neighboring Tang dynasty. Historical records describe close diplomatic ties between the Uyghurs and Tang China during this period. Chinese craftsmen may even have assisted in constructing portions of the fortress. Pourbajan reflects a fascinating blend of steppe traditions and settled architectural practices. Yet almost immediately, questions begin to emerge. Despite its impressive scale, archaeologists recovered surprisingly few everyday objects, very little domestic pottery, almost no evidence of long-term food preparation, few tools, few personal belongings. There are no extensive refuse deposits normally associated with permanently occupied settlements. It appears that people lived here only briefly, if at all, for such a monumental construction project. The silence left behind is striking. Several explanations have been proposed. Some researchers believe Pourbajan served as a royal summer residence. Its mountain setting would have offered cooler temperatures during the warmer months. Others suggest it functioned as a military fortress, guarding an important route through the surrounding highlands. Another possibility is that it served as a ceremonial or religious complex. Historical sources record that some Uyghur rulers adopted Manichaeism, a religion originating in Persia. Certain architectural features have prompted speculation that the site may have included religious buildings, although the evidence remains inconclusive. Scientific investigations have added another piece to the puzzle. Geologists discovered evidence that the region experienced significant earthquakes during the period shortly after construction. Some structural damage visible in the walls appears consistent with seismic activity. If a major earthquake struck soon after the fortress was completed, it may have rendered the complex unsuitable for continued occupation. At the same time, the surrounding lake itself has changed repeatedly over the centuries. Fluctuating water levels may have altered access to the island, making the fortress increasingly impractical. Natural forces, rather than warfare, may have determined its fate. Excavations have uncovered beautifully crafted roof tiles, decorative clay ornaments, iron nails, fragments of painted plaster, and traces of elaborate wooden buildings long since decayed. The preservation of the site's layout has allowed archaeologists to reconstruct much of its original appearance. Remote sensing, dendrochronology, radiocarbon dating, and microscopic analysis of building materials have all contributed to a far more detailed understanding of the fortress than was possible only a few decades ago. Yet none has fully answered the central question. Why was such an ambitious project abandoned so quickly? The decline of the Uyghur Khaganate later in the 9th century cannot entirely explain Pourbajan's abandonment. Evidence suggests the fortress had already fallen out of use long before the empire itself collapsed. Its empty courtyards remained exposed to Siberia's severe winters. Timber buildings gradually decayed, roofs collapsed beneath snow, walls slowly eroded beneath wind and rain. Nature reclaimed the island with remarkable patience. Today, Pourbajan remains one of the most enigmatic archaeological sites anywhere on the Eurasian steppe. Its walls still enclose an empty city that never truly became a city. No battle ended its story. No invading army destroyed its gates. Instead, its builders quietly departed, leaving behind only carefully planned foundations surrounded by mountain silence. The fortress reminds us that not every mystery ends with catastrophe. Sometimes, entire communities simply walk away, and history is left to wonder why. The fortress left standing after a river kingdom faded away, along the southern bank of the Euphrates River. Beyond the modern city of Raqqa, a massive line of ancient walls still traces the outline of a forgotten capital. Towering mud-brick ramparts stretch across the plain. Weathered defensive towers interrupt the walls at regular intervals. A monumental gateway still marks the entrance to a city that once stood at the center of an empire. The streets inside have largely vanished. The palaces have crumbled. The markets have fallen silent. Yet the walls remain, guarding the memory of a city whose importance was tied to one of history's greatest rivers. This is Al-Rafiqa, one of the best preserved early Islamic fortified cities in the Middle East. The city of Al-Rafiqa was founded in AD 772 during the reign of the Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur. Rather than developing naturally over centuries, it was carefully planned from the beginning. Its builders designed a powerful military city beside the older settlement of Raqqa. Together, the two communities eventually merged into one of the most important urban centers of the Abbasid world. Its location beside the Euphrates made it both strategically valuable and economically prosperous. The Euphrates had shaped civilizations for thousands of years, long before Al-Rafiqa existed. The river had sustained the kingdoms of Mesopotamia. Its waters nourished farmland, supported trade, and connected distant cities through an extensive network of transport. By constructing Al-Rafiqa beside this ancient waterway, the Abbasids positioned themselves at one of the great crossroads of the Islamic world. Caravans arrived from Anatolia, Persia, Arabia, and the Mediterranean. River traffic carried grain, textiles, timber, and ceramics across vast distances. The city's fortifications reflected its importance. Al-Rafiqa was surrounded by enormous circular-inspired defensive walls built primarily from baked brick and mud brick. More than 100 semicircular towers strengthened the perimeter. A wide defensive ditch lay beyond the walls. Several monumental gates carefully controlled access to the city. The design echoed earlier Islamic capitals, including Baghdad, demonstrating the remarkable engineering and urban planning of the Abbasid state. Within these defenses, a thriving city emerged. Broad streets connected residential districts, administrative buildings, mosques, markets, and military installations. Workshops produced pottery, glass, metalwork, and textiles. Merchants traded goods arriving from every corner of the expanding Islamic world. Scholars, officials, soldiers, and craftsmen all contributed to the city's remarkable prosperity. Al-Rafiqa quickly became far more than a fortress. It became a center of government, commerce, and culture. Its greatest period of importance came during the reign of Caliph Harun al-Rashid in the late 8th century. Known from both historical sources and later literary tradition, Harun made Raqqa and Al-Rafiqa one of his principal residences for several years. From here, he directed military campaigns toward the Byzantine frontier. Diplomatic envoys arrived from distant kingdoms. Government officials administered an empire stretching from North Africa to Central Asia. For a time, the political heart of one of history's largest empires beat beside the Euphrates. Archaeological excavations have revealed impressive remains throughout the site. Sections of the original walls survive to considerable height. Gateways still preserve remarkable brickwork. Excavators have uncovered palaces, residential quarters, pottery kilns, coins, glass vessels, decorated ceramics, and sophisticated water management systems. These discoveries demonstrate both the wealth of the city and the advanced engineering skills of its builders. Even after more than 12 centuries, The city's original layout remains surprisingly recognizable, yet no capital remains at the center of power forever. During the 9th century, the Abbasid rulers gradually shifted their political focus elsewhere. Administrative functions moved. Royal courts relocated. Trade routes evolved. Although Raqqa continued to be inhabited, its role as an imperial capital steadily diminished. The immense walls that had once protected the seat of government now enclosed a city of far less political importance. Over the following centuries, the region experienced repeated conflicts. Various dynasties governed the city. The Mongol invasions of the 13th century brought widespread disruption across much of the Middle East. Although parts of the settlement survived, many monumental buildings gradually fell into ruin. Earthquakes, floods, weather, and the simple passage of time continued reshaping the landscape. The great defensive walls endured long after the institutions they had protected disappeared. Unlike many ancient cities, Al-Rafiqa was never completely erased. Its fortifications remained standing as later communities built around and within portions of the old city. Today, visitors can still follow the outline of the Abbasid walls, walk beside surviving towers, and imagine the immense scale of a city that once governed an empire. The Euphrates continues to flow nearby, just as it did when caravans entered through the Great Gates more than 1,200 years ago. The rulers who commanded armies from Al-Rafiqa are gone. The bustling markets have long since fallen quiet. The empire that built these magnificent walls exists only in history. Yet the fortress still stands, looking across the same river that first gave it life. Al-Rafiqa reminds us that great cities often owe their existence to geography. When political power fades, and kingdoms pass into memory, the rivers continue flowing, while the walls remain, keeping silent watch over civilizations that once believed they would last forever. The fortress carved into a forgotten river gorge, above the winding waters of the Tigris River. Golden limestone cliffs rise from one of the deepest river gorges in southeastern Turkey. Hundreds of dark cave openings cover the cliff faces. The remains of ancient walls follow the edge of the plateau. A medieval citadel crowns the summit, looking across a landscape where countless civilizations once crossed paths. For thousands of years, people carved homes, churches, mosques, and fortifications directly into the living rock. This is Hasankeyf, a settlement so old that its history stretches back more than 12,000 years. Yet today, much of its ancient landscape lies beneath the waters of a modern reservoir. Hasankeyf occupies one of the most strategic locations along the upper Tigris. The river carved a natural corridor through the surrounding mountains, creating an ideal crossing point between Anatolia and Mesopotamia. Long before cities rose nearby, hunter-gatherers were already living in the caves overlooking the gorge. Archaeological evidence suggests human occupation began during the pre-pottery Neolithic, making Hasankeyf one of the oldest continuously inhabited places in the region. Generation after generation, each culture added another layer to the cliffs. Its greatest natural defense was the landscape itself. The steep limestone escarpment protected the settlement on one side, while the Tigris formed a formidable barrier below. Builders strengthened these natural advantages by constructing powerful fortifications across the plateau. Walls, towers, and gates transformed the rocky outcrop into a fortress that controlled one of the most important river crossings in Upper Mesopotamia. Anyone wishing to move armies or trade caravans through the valley had to reckon with Hasankeyf. The caves remain among its most remarkable features. Researchers estimate that several thousand rock-cut chambers once honeycombed the cliffs. Some served as simple homes. Others became workshops, storehouses, stables, or places of worship. Entire neighborhoods developed within the stone itself. Stairways connected different levels, while tunnels linked parts of the settlement hidden from the river below. Unlike many cave settlements, Hasankeyf continued expanding for centuries, adapting naturally as its population grew. Control of the fortress changed many times. The Romans recognized its strategic value. Later, the Byzantines strengthened its defenses against Eastern rivals. Following the Islamic conquests of the 7th century, various Muslim dynasties governed the city. Among the most influential were the Artuqids during the 12th century. Under their rule, Hasankeyf flourished as a center of trade, learning, and architecture. The fortress overlooked a prosperous town filled with markets, bathhouses, mosques, and caravanserais serving merchants traveling between distant regions. One of the city's greatest engineering achievements was its bridge across the Tigris. Constructed during the medieval period, it was among the largest stone bridges of its time. Its central span may once have been made of timber, allowing defenders to remove sections during times of war. Travelers from across Asia and the Middle East crossed this bridge while transporting silk, spices, livestock, metal goods, and textiles, although only portions survive today. Its remaining piers still reveal the remarkable ambition of its builders. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence from nearly every major historical era. Roman fortifications, Byzantine churches, Islamic madrasas, palaces, cisterns, ceramic workshops, coins from dozens of dynasties. Decorated pottery, glass vessels, metal tools, and beautifully carved architectural fragments all testify to a city that continuously adapted rather than disappearing after a single age. Very few archaeological sites preserve such an uninterrupted sequence of human occupation, yet prosperity rarely lasts forever. Trade routes gradually shifted, regional political power moved toward larger cities, repeated wars, Mongol invasions, and changing economic conditions reduced Hasankeyf's importance. Although people continued living within the cliffs, its role as a major commercial and military center slowly faded. The fortress remained, but the caravans became fewer. The great markets grew quieter. The bustling river crossing that had once connected empires no longer dominated regional commerce. Modern archaeology transformed understanding of the site. Excavations documented thousands of caves, medieval neighborhoods, palaces, mosques, and sophisticated water systems carved directly into the bedrock. Researchers identified evidence spanning more than 12 millennia of human history. Recognizing the extraordinary significance of these remains, teams worked for years to document monuments before major changes altered the landscape forever. Some important historic structures, including ornate mausoleums and monumental gateways, were carefully relocated to higher ground using modern engineering. Others could not be moved. In the early 21st century, the completion of the Ilisu Dam dramatically changed the valley. As the reservoir filled, large sections of ancient Hasankeyf disappeared beneath the rising waters. Many caves, lower districts, and archaeological remains were permanently submerged. The towering citadel still rises above the lake, but the river gorge that shaped the city's history has been transformed forever. The fortress survives. Yet much of the world that once surrounded it now rests beneath calm water. Today, visitors standing atop the ancient citadel still look across the limestone cliffs where thousands of cave dwellings remain visible. The walls continue overlooking the valley, just as they have for centuries. Below them, the waters of the reservoir conceal streets once filled with merchants, pilgrims, and travelers following the Tigris toward distant kingdoms. Hasankeyf reminds us that history is not always lost through war or neglect. Sometimes, entire landscapes change. Rivers are redirected, valleys become lakes, and ancient fortresses continue watching over places that no longer exist as they once did. The city where an entire pottery guild vanished overnight. On the broad plains of northeastern Iran, a low series of weathered mounds rises gently above the surrounding farmland. There are no standing temples, no towering palaces, no monumental walls visible from a distance. At first glance, Tepe Hissar appears almost unremarkable. Yet beneath these quiet hills lie the remains of a settlement that flourished for nearly 2,000 years, producing some of the finest pottery of prehistoric Iran. Generation after generation, master craftsmen shaped elegant vessels, painted intricate geometric designs, and fired ceramics whose quality spread far beyond their own community. Then, almost without warning, the tradition ended. The kilns grew cold, the workshops fell silent, and one of the region's greatest pottery industries disappeared from history. Tepe Hissar stands near the modern city of Damgan, positioned along an important natural corridor linking the Iranian plateau with Central Asia. Its location allowed people to move between mountains, deserts, and fertile plains. Because of this, communities settled here as early as the 5th millennium BC, over many centuries. The settlement expanded into one of northeastern Iran's most important prehistoric centers, rather than belonging to a single civilization. Tepe Hissar witnessed countless generations adapting to changing environments and new cultural influences. Archaeologists divide the site's long occupation into several phases, known simply as Hissar I, Hissar II, and Hissar III. Each represents gradual changes in architecture, technology, burial customs, and artistic traditions. Among the clearest markers of these changing societies is their pottery. The earliest inhabitants produced beautifully painted ceramics decorated with birds, mountain goats, zigzag patterns, and flowing geometric designs. Every vessel reflected remarkable precision. The pottery was not merely functional. It also carried artistic traditions passed carefully from one generation of craftsmen to the next. Excavations have revealed large numbers of pottery kilns, clay working areas, grinding stones, and unfinished vessels. These discoveries suggest that ceramic production formed a specialized craft within the settlement. Certain families may have devoted themselves almost entirely to pottery making. Clay had to be carefully selected, purified, mixed with water, shaped by hand, decorated with mineral pigments, and fired at carefully controlled temperatures. Mastering every stage required years of experience. The consistency of the ceramics indicates that knowledge was shared through well-established traditions. The pottery itself traveled far beyond Tepe Hissar. Similar vessels have been discovered at distant settlements across the Iranian plateau. This suggests that local craftsmen participated in extensive exchange networks linking communities separated by hundreds of kilometers. Merchants likely carried ceramics alongside obsidian, copper, semi-precious stones, and agricultural goods. Far from being an isolated village, Tepe Hissar formed part of a much larger prehistoric world connected through trade and shared technologies. As the settlement developed, its economy diversified. Evidence for copper metallurgy began to appear. Archaeologists uncovered molds, metal tools, ornaments, and weapons indicating increasingly sophisticated craftsmanship. Burials became richer, some containing jewelry, stone vessels, weapons, and decorative objects imported from distant regions. Social differences also became more visible. Certain individuals received elaborate graves, while others were buried with only modest possessions. The community had become increasingly complex. Then, toward the end of the 3rd millennium BC, everything changed. The distinctive painted pottery that had defined Tepe Hissar for centuries suddenly declined. The finely decorated ceramics became rare. Traditional designs disappeared. Many kilns ceased operating. Workshops that had once produced elegant vessels were abandoned. Archaeologists find no evidence that the entire settlement was violently destroyed. Instead, the specialized ceramic tradition simply came to an abrupt end. For generations, researchers have asked why. Several explanations have been proposed. Climate may have played a role. Periods of increasing aridity affected many settlements across the Iranian plateau during this time. Reduced agricultural production could have disrupted trade and weakened specialized industries. Others point to changing trade routes. If merchants no longer passed through Tepe Hissar, demand for its pottery may have collapsed. Population movements also occurred across much of Central Asia during the late 3rd millennium BC. New groups arriving in the region may have introduced different technologies, different tastes, and entirely new ceramic traditions, rather than disappearing through catastrophe. The old guild of potters may simply have lost its place within a rapidly changing world. The settlement itself continued for some time, but its character changed. Architecture evolved. Burial customs shifted. Metalworking became increasingly important. The distinctive artistic identity that had once made Tepe Hissar famous gradually faded into the background. The ancient pottery workshops were never restored to their former prominence. Generations of accumulated knowledge, carefully preserved over centuries, quietly disappeared. Modern excavations have uncovered thousands of ceramic fragments, allowing archaeologists to reconstruct the remarkable achievements of these prehistoric craftsmen. Laboratory analysis reveals where clays originated, how pigments were prepared, and the temperatures reached inside ancient kilns. Each broken vessel provides another small piece of a much larger story. Together, they reveal a community whose greatest legacy was not monumental architecture, but extraordinary skill passed patiently from teacher to apprentice across many generations. Today, the winds still sweep across the low mounds of Tepe Hissar. Nothing remains of the bustling workshops. No smoke rises from the kilns. No potters shape fresh clay beneath the open sky. Only scattered fragments survive, waiting beneath the soil for archaeologists to assemble their forgotten story. Tepe Hissar reminds us that civilizations are remembered not only through kings and monuments, but also through ordinary craftsmen whose knowledge can vanish within a single generation. When the last master potter laid down his tools, an artistic tradition that had endured for centuries quietly came to an end, leaving behind only broken pottery, and one of prehistoric Iran's most enduring archaeological mysteries.